Show sound good to me. Oh, yes.
It's Fish, Grits, and Politics. And now, from the Breakfast Club, it's Marcus Davis.
Welcome back to another episode of Fish, Grits, and Politics. I'm your host, Marcus Davis. On the menu tonight, we have a hearty discussion of religion. The topic is the role and relevance of the church, with an emphasis on the black church. So go ahead and put your hand on the TV or the computer and get your prayer line ready, because it's going to get warm up in here. Joining me for this lively discussion and this informative discussion on religion is Rice Professor of Religious Studies, Dr. Anthony Pinn, St. John Pastor, Pastor Connie C.J. Jackson, Windsor Village Pastor, Pastor Ray Bady, and Egberto Willies, political activist and radio host. Also, we'll have a powerful word on Poetry High from poet Emoetry Speaks and chef Mark Anthony Hawkins. Please go to our website, fishgritsandpolitics.com, and subscribe to our YouTube page as well. Thank you for sharing this with your friends and your family. And don't forget the hashtag Fish, Grits, and Politics. If you're ready, and they're ready, and I know I'm ready, let's get our grub on.
Fish, grits, and politics. Show sound good to me. We can still break bread together even if you don't really agree. Oh, yes. So come on in and take a seat. Oh, yes. Sit back and grab something to eat. Oh, yes. Listen up, we got something to teach. My guess is gonna blow your mind. Fish, grits, and politics. Show sound good to me. Fish, grits, and politics. Come on in, I'm sure you'll agree. Oh, yes.
Thank you for joining us on Fish, Grits, and Politics. I'm your host, Marcus Davis. I want to thank those of you who are watching online, and I want to thank those of you who have joined us in the live audience right here at the Breakfast Club. On this edition, we're tackling an issue that may get things stirred up just a little bit, but we're living in a time where I believe people and issues need to be stirred up. Shake it up. Let me ask you a question. 2019, is the church still relevant? Particularly the black church. What is the role of the church today? Joining me to tackle these topics, none other than the great professor of religious studies over at Rice University, Dr. Anthony Pinn, and community activist and talk show host, Egberto Willies. Give it up for our guests. And welcome to Fish, Grits, and Politics. You heard the intro. You've seen the data. This is work that you guys have studied for quite some time and have talked about for quite some time. Let's jump right into it and talk about the role and the relevance of the church here in 2019. We'll start with you, Dr. Pinn.
So when we talk in terms of the black church, we really mean the three Methodist denominations, AME Zion, CME, the three large Baptist denominations, Church of God in Christ, right? We don't really mean the smaller ones. We mean those seven. And there's been an assumption that the black church is the first institution for and by black folks, with the minister accountable only to black folks. And from that, we've assumed that these churches not only have been the source of protest, but have to be the source of protest. But the truth is, even if you look at the civil rights movement, the vast majority of black churches were not involved.
You know, that is a myth, not just about the church, but about the 60s as a whole. Whenever people talk about the days of the civil rights movement, we talk as though there was this one unified body. And that's just not the case in and out of the church.
Right. So the vast majority weren't involved. When we think in terms of the period of slavery, we think in terms of black churches being about the business of resisting slavery, but we really mean Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser. We don't mean most black churches. The vast majority of black churches have been inward looking. That is, they've been concerned with what takes place after this life, getting the soul right, not about the business of transforming society. And for me, that's the way it needs to be. I'm not convinced that churches are equipped to transform public life, in part because they are premised upon the assumption of an insider group and an outsider group.
Well, there's a difference between whether or not they're equipped and whether or not they're responsible. the lack of being equipped may be an addition to the argument of why are you not equipped for what you should be responsible for.
But I'm going to get to that.
got it.
I'll get to that. Just give me a second. I'll get to that.
Let's get Brother Egberto an opportunity. You've been very vocal.
Yes,
on your program and on your social media platform. Let's hear what you have to say.
The professor is right with regards to it. Really, a lot of these issues don't belong in the church. Unfortunately, the church is there, and the reality is that the church plays a huge part in our society at large. So my thing is, I am not necessarily trying to. In the past, I used to try to change culture. My wife is a deacon. Okay. I am a humanist.
I am sure that there are some great conversations that go on in your house.
There are some wonderful conversations, especially since in the beginning, I just couldn't see somebody being of the church. I learned how to adapt to having a wife who is a deacon. Now, why am I saying that? There are two ways to skin a cat, right? One of the ways is to say, well, I think what you're doing is wrong, and I'm not telling anybody here what you're doing is wrong or anything of that nature, but what I'm saying is, I personally am not of the church, but I do think that the church has a purpose. And given that most people, not myself, most people think the church has a purpose, as an activist, I have to work within that realm. When I find that ministers, pastors, reverends don't do as they should, that becomes concerning.
When you say as they should, are you talking about social responsibility?
Social responsibility. Okay. In other words, given that we have a black population, well, a population in general, but specifically a black population, that you think the church is a place where, as a doctor would say, where social change, where all these changes are to occur, I think it is their responsibility then to play the part. Right. Whether it is so or not, they should play the part. I think one of the reasons that we have not been as far as we should, as let's say, as a people, is because they failed. And it's hard to look at good pastors because, again, like I said, right. The pastor that my wife is under, he's a great guy, and he does a lot for the community. Too many are not, because you gave a perfect description when you just brought it in, and you said, look around even Houston.
Right.
You have a lot of churches, and then you have blight around there. So,
Dr. Pinn, you left off at whether or not they were equipped and whether or not it was the job, the role.
So on the level of the individual, I'm all about churches meeting individual needs. There are ways in which churches have kept black folks alive. On the level of the individual, right, in terms of what folks might call spiritual need. That's one thing. But again, I'd say that they're premised upon a sense of an insider group and an outsider group. And that using the biblical text as authority, you can do what you need to do to the outsider group. I can't think of another way to explain the long history of disregard for black women within black churches.
True,
or the ways in which black churches have done horrible work with respect to issues of sexuality. The horrible job, and it's questionable the kind of work they've done in terms of class. So based upon that, I'm not convinced that they are the best organization to lead black folks forward in terms of public life.
But when research shows that so many African Americans still see the church as their center of influence, their center of leadership, where else are they going to get influence and leadership?
But let's look.
I mean, we can say that we don't know if it should be there. We can say that we don't know if they're equipped. But we can also say that we know that the majority of folks, it is moving, but currently the majority of folks still find their leadership within their religious organization.
Studies demonstrate that if you ask black folks about the religiosity, the point of agreement is belief in God. Roughly 94% of African Americans believe in God. That does not equate to 94% of black folks believing in the church, right? So if you think about it this way, after the civil rights movement, black church membership begins to decline. Church membership in the United States in more general terms begins to decline, but black church membership begins to decline. It doesn't pick up again until the mid-'80s when folks who have played by the rules, right? They said, talk a certain way, go to the right schools, live in the right places. Yeah? So
Reagan sent us back to church.
I wonder why.
In a real sense, black middle class, right? Black middle class realized that they had given up so much, a cultural connection, social connections, that they began moving back into black churches. If nothing else, it was a place where you didn't have to explain why you were angry.
So,
right? But they didn't necessarily buy the theology. It was the social and cultural
the social
connection.
component to it. So, just so you know, this pot stirring, it wasn't my idea. This, again, this was based off of research that I've read, and it's also based off of one of my heroes, one of my idols, is none other than Dr. King, because he talked about this at length, particularly in his very last words on earth. Let's take a listen.
Who is it that is supposed to articulate the longings and aspirations of the people more than the preacher? Somehow the preacher must have a kind of fire shut up in his bones. And whenever injustice is around, he must tell it. So often, preachers aren't concerned about anything but themselves. And I'm always happy to see a relevant ministry. It's all right to talk about long white robes over yonder in all of its symbolism. But ultimately, people want some suits and dresses and shoes to wear down here. It's all right to talk about streets flowing with milk and honey. But God has commanded us, be concerned about the slums down here and his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day.
Those were the words delivered by Dr. King, as I stated before, in his very last speech. And he was adamant about what the role of the preacher is, which correlates into what the role of the church is. And I submit that some of those words are still applicable today. We're not done with this. Of course, we got to bring the clergy in to finish off the rest of this discussion. We're going to hear from Pastor in just a few minutes, so y'all stay tuned. We got Pastor coming up. We got some grits being cooked over there. We got word from on high from Emoetry Speaks, and we got these brothers. We got a lot more for you. Y'all stay tuned. We're going to keep stirring this pot so we can get something good cooking. We'll be right back with you.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service, striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
The Breakfast Club, America's best breakfast. Woo! Welcome back to Fish, Grits, and Politics. We're continuing our conversation about the church and its relevance. And we're asking the question of whether or not it is as relevant as it was 50 to 60 years ago, or even 100 years ago in the days of Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, as the professor alluded to. There's some stats, some research that we want to take a look at. According to the Pew Research study, there are a variety of reasons that people don't go to church. A couple of them are they're no longer believers and they practice their faith in other ways. Those are a couple of the popular responses. But also on the list is them not feeling welcome, and greed and corruption as well. Now, based on this survey, that feeling was a little bit higher, because remember our emphasis on African Americans, is a little bit higher amongst African Americans. Joining me to continue this discussion, Pastor CJ and Pastor Ray Bady. Y'all give it up. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the producer, but when they sat y'all, I was hoping they would sit Ray over here. I just had I have flashbacks of being pinched in church by women. And I if I say something wrong, don't pinch me, Pastor Connie. That's all.
I could have pinched harder. You never know.
You saw the graphic. I'm certain and hopeful that you've heard the research. Let's talk about this era where people are deciding that I want to practice my faith in a different way. I no longer believe what my grandmother believed in the way that my grandmother believed it. That's one. And then the other part of it is I see too much that is deterring me from wanting to participate. So I'll start with you, Pastor CJ.
I think what's interesting is that when we take a look at who we used to be, in the era that you were talking about. We didn't have access to anything else. So now that we have access to other institutions, other sporting events, you name it, the church has now become an option rather than the place we go. And here's the truth. Not every black person always went to church. Let's just say that.
Oh, that's the good.
Let's just put that out there. But there was a healthy respect for the church. Preacher passed by, or the good sister passed by, and you had something in a brown bag. You put it behind your back, or you took your hat off, or you stopped smoking, or what have you. And now it's a matter of, hey, they're just regular folks like I am. And so I think when we talk about, is the church relevant, I think we also have to ask, is it because the church is not respected?
And which is a legitimate question. And I think part of that has to be responded to by saying, has respect been warranted, or has the respect deteriorated as a result of some of the things that have been reported in the research? What say you?
Well, I heard you say that people don't go because they've seen too much. But I'm not an expert, but just from my experience of growing up in the church, my dad was a pastor, my brothers, my mothers, the dogs, the cats, the roaches, everybody's preaching. So I kind of have an experience. But one thing that I noticed is that if something happens at Walmart,
right,
okay, where you have a bad experience, you don't stop going to Walmart, you just stop going to that Walmart, and you find another store to get your needs met. I think one time, what sometimes the people do is they take the one experience that they've had with flawed people, because we're flawed people, we're all flawed. And it's the same grace that you need extended for you, we don't extend to the church when the church has flaws. The church is flawed because people operate church. Right. And there's not a perfect people. The only perfect person, in my opinion, in my experience, is Jesus, my Lord and Savior. So the entity that he made is always going to be right. When you put people in the mix, it's always going to be flawed. And again, grace needs to be extended to the people in leadership running that entity, as well as the grace that's extended to the people that go and visit the entity.
Now let's examine what you shared, right? And I have to pick at it.
Okay.
When you talk about what happens with Walmart,
yes,
and what happens with the church, I don't know that they're on the same playing field. See, Walmart wasn't called, right? Walmart wasn't created. Walmart wasn't ordained, right? Walmart is just Walmart. So I don't know that we can necessarily compare the two. The other part is when you talk about separate instances, there may be separate instances that are happening in different places. Do we extend that same grace? When one cop shoots a kid out on the street, do we talk about corrupt police? We don't extend grace. We talk about the corruption that exists amongst the industry and the entity.
But we don't stop.
You follow what I'm saying?
But we don't stop calling the police when we have a need.
Yeah, but we also don't bestow the same trust in them that we used to. You follow what I'm saying?
I follow.
Let's hear from.
I was, while he was talking, I was listening to the audience, right?
Yeah.
And if you notice, there was a symbiotic relationship between his tonality and the way they came back.
That's called preacher talk.
Right.
Call and response.
So what I get out of that, and what I was talking to the professor about, is that is the reason why we have to work within. And again, you're talking to a humanist here. And I realize that, well, I can't look at you guys and say, believe what I believe. But what I can do is say, okay, I'm going to be with you guys because there's a bigger thing that we have to get done as a people to actually get something. That we have a big job to do in this country right now. And until we can get to everybody, whomever, wherever they are, we're not going to get it. It's huge. And when I call myself and say I'm a political activist, and sometimes the people taught me this, right? It's because you sit down and it's like, you're not getting a darn thing done if you're fighting two battles.
Right.
I can't fight the church and fight the politics at the same time.
You got to work with people where they are.
I got to work where people are at, and then we can actually get something done.
Dr. Pinn.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for what the pastor mentioned that there are alternatives, right? There are different strategies. Black Lives Matter is a prime example of this, right? That it is much larger than any particular organization, right? That it is expansive in a way that cuts against traditional understanding of the role of the church. And I think that's a model we need to give some consideration to. And I understand, I would agree with you that people are flawed, but for me, there's another question that we have to ask ourselves. Is there something about the theology, something about the doctrine that not only allows for, but encourages, right? I'm a humanist too, so I want to be right above board about that. But is there something about Christian theology and doctrine that we need to interrogate when it allows for folks who want to be about the business, but also allows for Jerry Falwell Jr. And a deification of Trump?
Sure.
Yeah. Go respond to that. I want to go to the next question. Go ahead.
So for me, I think the folks in the pews, so to speak, have a right to have a high expectation of those of us in the pulpit. And to say that we're flawed, so we are, but we say that we represent this God, right, who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ever ask or think, according to the power that exists within us, right? But I think they have the right to expect that we live better, that we practice what we preach, and what we are saying is that we've diminished the divinity that's within our humanity.
And I think that's the point that I was trying to make about the Walmart analogy, is that people have a different expectation, and I believe rightfully so. Let's move to the next part, which is the church with regard to social responsibility. Is the church responsible for what it's done in the past, which is lifting the foot and the hand and the whole damn body of oppression off of the necks of black folk?
I think Acts 2:42 would support that, because it says not only that they devote themselves to the apostles' teachings, but they also sold what they had to make sure that anybody who had a need, it was met. And I don't think we operate in the Acts 2 church anymore.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why not?
Oh.
And when I say why not, considering how vast the need has grown. No, the physical shackles aren't there anymore, right? No, Jim Crow doesn't exist as overt as it has been in the past. But when you look at all of the stats of where black people are compared to where we were, it hadn't gotten better. I mean, we feel better because we got bigger houses and better cars. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie.
Some people, but the residue of the physical change still exists. And the residue of Jim Crow still exists.
So if the residue of Jim Crow still exists,
the church still has a job to do.
There we go. Whoa, that's on you.
I agree. I'm agreeing with the church in this.
You agree with the church?
Yeah, I agree with the church. But again, because as long as I speak about the pastor at the church that my wife goes to, I'm very impressed with the man, because he's not only he's walking the walk, he's talking to the kids, he's bringing, which is something that we have to get done. And a lot of the, let's say, the secular folks like myself aren't necessarily doing the job, or maybe not equipped to do the job. So let's put service where it needs to be, and if that is with the church, I'll be right there supporting the church.
So if we agree that it's necessary, right, and we agree that it's the role, then what has happened? Do we see the church at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement? Do we see the church at the forefront of police brutality? Do we see the church at the forefront of gentrification? Do we see the church at the forefront of so many of the ills that plague African American people? We said it's the role. We said that it's the responsibility. What's happened?
One of it.
And just like you say the church, and we say blacks, the church is not monolithic. It's not, because you have churches who are doing exactly what they're involved in social justice. They're involved in feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and prison ministries. And then you have churches that are set up as businesses.
Right. Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah, it's both and. And the problem is, though, we're judged by the worst example that's out there and painted with a broad brush that they all like that in my vernacular.
Well, I have to say this, and I agree with you. That is a fair statement. But I would also have to agree that there's a judgment based on the numbers, because the numbers do not lie. We lead the nation in incarceration. So we can say that some are doing, but we still lead the nation in incarceration. We lead the nation we're at the bottom of the totem pole in wealth disparity. So we could say that some are doing, but we still piss poor broke.
So not enough. Not enough are doing it, and not enough know how to access and augment the services that they have.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And for folks like yourself.
I don't think it's the church's, that part is the church's responsibility, though. You mentioned Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter operates outside the domain of the church, and justifiably so.
Well, the speech we listened to, Dr. King talked about, he says, come out of your pulpit and be in the march. I mean, he called on everybody. And he said that this is the job, this is the role, this is the responsibility of the people, and who better to lead these people in doing this than the preacher.
That part, I don't want them out of the pulpit.
That part, you what?
I don't want them out of the pulpit.
On that we agree. Right, that I think in the context of the United States, you are not only authorized, but free to do what you want with your Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. As individuals, you worship how you want to worship where you want to worship. But I'm a fan of the separation of church and state. I think it's a good thing for a variety of reasons. But it seems to me that I am perplexed by this, that within communities that...
I'm grateful that there was no separation of church and state when Nat Turner tried to get us out of slavery. I'm grateful that there was no separation of church when the SCLC decided that they would help get Jim Crow off my mama and daddy's back. I'm grateful for those things.
Well, but here's my point. You can't have it both ways.
Why not?
If churches, there is a separation of church and state. If you are not going to abide by that, then give up the perks, right? So you can't be tax exempt and not abide by this, right? So I'm baffled by this. In communities with so many churches that don't pay property taxes, if you want to be about the business of economic advancement, then that money you're not paying as property taxes, use in the community.
Hey, that's
very true. I agree with that.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break on that.
That was profound.
I just said a break. Because we're going to come back to it. We have another part of the program. We're getting ready to get blessed by a word from on high from Emoetry Speaks. And later we're going to have a little good grub cooked up by Chef Mark Anthony. And then we're going to come back to the table of fellowship, get our grub on, and dig more into what Dr. Pinn just said. You will read my notes? You've been in... That's good, because when the emails come in, I'll blame it on you. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back with you.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Welcome back to Fish, Grits, and Politics. I'm Marcus Davis. We're about to get our grub on with Chef Mark Anthony in just a few minutes, but right now we're about to be blessed with a word from on Poetry High from Emoetry Speaks.
I saw a sign the other day, and it said that God is looking for a faithful Christian. And I feel like I should have a problem with that sign. I mean, don't get it wrong. I totally understand the concept. But what if I was a struggling Christian, just got saved, brand spanking new with no clue of how to put my total trust in God because my unfairly odd family and friends, those whom I thought I could depend, well, they betrayed me. And as a result, I have a few trust issues. So is God not looking for a Christian like that? Or what if I was a type of Christian that had good intentions because of the type of teaching I received, the crooked preaching I believed, the gossiping that I was exposed to coming directly from the pulpit? Side note, not all preachers that are preaching the gospel was called to preach, but that was my only reach. So is God not looking for a Christian like that too? What about the unsaved, the afraid, those who have never heard of the greatest love of all, and those that were called, but yet are still going through hell as a test to their testimony, but as of right now, this very moment, they are not ready? If they were to see that sign, do you think that they would know that they were next in line for their breakthrough? Can I be honest with you? See, the truth of the matter is, the church hurt me. Not the church that Christ loved so much, but the assuming, the criticizing, the stereotyping, backbiting members of the holier than thou. I have the authority to judge and to crucify your character because you have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Church, you know, they really did something to my spirit. Not that I was straggling the fence, but it took some time for me to learn my strengths and my weaknesses throughout my Christian journey. But that didn't matter to them. I had a lot of questions with answers that were hard to find, trying to define a book that they told me was written in English, but to me, it didn't sound like it was written in English because, yea, though I readeth this verse in this chapter, I'm getting confused and I'm trying not to curse because I don't know anybody that talks like that. And for you to require me to only know the King James Version, well, I can't comprehend it like that. And then when I took my concerns to the elders, the way that they treated me, well, I didn't know that Christians were even allowed to act like that. So why is it that you have a sign that says that God is only looking for a faithful Christian? I think I have a problem with that. What the sign should say is that he's looking for the saved and the unsaved, the believers and the unbelievers, the torn, the broken, the hurt, the confused, because God loves you and he wants to hold you and heal you and to surround you with people that can feel your pain and to help you gain your confidence in Christ. Because I'm going to be honest with you, as a sinner, if I were to see that sign and I were to compare it to my life, you would have lost me before I could even make it to the door.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service, striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Welcome back to Fish, Grits, and Politics. Joining me right now is executive chef and caterer Mark Anthony Hawkins. Y'all give it up for the chef. Hawkins. Chef, welcome to Fish, Grits, and Politics. I'm excited to have you here, brother.
Pleasure to be here.
We about to get our grub on. What are we cooking today?
All right, so a little adventurous of me, but I'm gonna go with a little grits here. So we're gonna do some saffron southern grits. So
got it.
Right now you have simmered in there already.
Somebody out there talking about, if you can smell what I'm smelling, it's All right, so we got saffron grits.
We got some saffron in there, a little bit of thyme. We have a little bit of white pepper.
Yeah.
A little bit of salt. So I'm gonna let you, secret, a little bit of coconut milk.
Coconut milk.
A little bit of coconut
in your
milk.
grits.
In the grits.
Hey, somebody write that down.
Don't do that. Don't do that. So go ahead and add a few grits there.
I'm gonna go ahead and add my grits in here.
Now the other thing we have.
I've done this once or twice.
Just a couple of times?
Yeah. You know, I grow my own grits.
Do you?
Yeah, I got a grit tree out in the back.
I have to talk to you.
And if you tell me your secret, I'll tell you mine.
I got you. We'll
All right,
talk later.
I got my grits in there.
So you're stirring. So the other thing we're gonna do is some ghost shrimp.
Gotcha.
So I already have some good ghost shrimp here. A little bit of garlic. Just add a little bit of salt, pepper.
All right. So we got our grits going. Got our coconut milk going. I need to add some salt.
little bit of salt.
A little bit of
Just a
salt.
pinch.
All right.
You
What's
got
that? What's that over there?
Stop it. Stop it. I saw that. I saw that.
All right, I got a little thyme.
A little time.
All right. There we go. And what else?
A little bit of white pepper.
A little bit of white pepper. Now, what?
Why
White pepper. Why white pepper?
Well, the black pepper turns it.
Okay.
I want the white pepper to give it the spice without turning the color.
Got it. So, you yeah.
While you stirring that.
Yeah, and that's important. Y'all got to make sure you stir your grits. Some of y'all be having some lumpy grits. Y'all ain't gonna lie to you. Y'all, you ain't stirring enough. All right, you got your shrimp going.
Got my shrimp going.
I meant that metaphorically. It's life. You'll catch that on the way home.
Other thing is just a little touch.
All right.
Drop a little butter down on
All right. So we got a little butter. And what's this one?
That's my salt and pepper blend.
Okay, got it. See, you ain't tell me about that.
See.
All right, so we got our grits going. We got our shrimp going. What else we making?
Now the other thing, you want to just turn that down a little bit. So we got these vegetable bundles. So, grab you a few green beans, a few asparagus.
Man, I absolutely love. Who loves asparagus? And I absolutely love asparagus. You want me to tie these up?
You're gonna tie them up.
All right.
You're gonna use this as your tie.
Yeah. Now this part, I ain't gonna lie to you. I might not be real good at this one right here. I haven't tied much vegetables in my lifetime. But what am I tying it with, Chef?
You are tying it with a blanched green onion.
Okay, got it.
That's actually from my front yard right there.
You grew this in your front yard?
That's front yard.
Boy, you country, huh?
I am.
You grew this in your front
My front yard.
Yeah. Now, how many of y'all growing herbs at home? Oh, we should. Yeah, we should. I don't know about the front yard.
Front yard.
Maybe in the backyard. All right, where I'm going with my vegetables.
You're gonna go right here.
All right, there we go.
It'll come down. So in this pot right here, real quick.
What is this?
This is a little bit of bone broth.
Okay.
Some Portugal Vinho Verde wine.
Right.
A little bit of butter. And a little bit of salt.
And where's that going?
All you're gonna do is you're gonna drop that in there, and it just steams your vegetables for a little bit.
Oh, you fancy, huh?
And that's it. You don't overcook them.
Y'all cook with bone broth? Man,
it's a deeper flavor.
It is. It adds depth to the flavor, definitely. All right, so we got our shrimp going, we got our grits going, we got our vegetables going. What else?
And that's a meal.
And that's a meal. We're gonna eat that meal in just a little bit. We're talking to Chef Mark Anthony Hawkins. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back with you.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
The breakfast. Welcome back to Fish, Grits, and Politics. I'm your host, Marcus Davis. I want to thank y'all for joining us on this excellent episode where we've been having dynamic conversation. I want to thank all of my guests for being here, starting with the preparer of the meal, Chef Mark Anthony Hawkins, Pastor Ray Bady, and Pastor CJ, Emoetry Speaks, Egberto Willis, and the professor. All right, we've been having a great conversation about the role and the relevance of the church in 2019. And I want to, first of all, thank everybody for honoring us with their time and honoring us with the engagement of fruitful dialogue. The hope is that when we're done with this, that we will leave with a message, right? And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for the food that we have, grateful for the fellowship, I'm grateful for those that have decided to join us, and grateful for this time. So with that being said, y'all feel free to dig in. Thank you, sir. All right. And while we dig in, we're gonna pick up this conversation, right? And I'm gonna jump it off with one of the issues that we opened with that exists today. One of the hot topics today, which will also lead to our next show, is gentrification. And we opened by talking about the churches that you can find in different communities and the poverty and the blight that's around them. Now, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this because it's been a minute. There's a scripture that says, "Without vision, the people perish." I'm wondering about the transformation of so many communities, particularly let's say a fourth ward, where a church is on every corner, and all of a sudden now there are $500,000 townhomes on those corners. When we ask ourselves about the vision within the church, how did we get to a point where these neighborhoods have been transformed, but not transformed in a way that is beneficial economically, socially, for the people who once resided there and for the people who practice or serve within those services?
I believe the church missed this opportunity.
I told y'all to eat, man.
As homes became dilapidated, churches should have collectively or individually purchased those homes, could have rehabbed them, made them into empty lots and built their own houses there for folks. And so I just think not just the lack of vision, but the lack of imagination.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue. We're so used to someone coming in, telling us what to do and how to do it, when we serve a God who created the heavens and the earth, right? We have that creative spirit, creative anointing within us, and we pass on it.
Why?
And a lot of times it's because I'm just dealing with my dad growing up. All they knew how to do is build a church. Nobody showed them how to build homes and how to buy things in the community. So I just feel like a lot of pastors, when I was growing up, they did what they only knew how to do. They didn't know how to do a lot of those other things. But now it becomes our responsibility, the people that are coming behind them, to now start doing those things and putting those things in place so that we can have what you just mentioned.
And don't get me wrong, I agree and admit to the lack of knowledge and the lack of exposure.
Yeah.
But again, you go back to Dr. King's last speech, this was talked about 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's do that. If you go back to, I mean, this gentrification push in America only started 15 years ago, right? So that's not my great grandfather's church. Mm-hmm. That's the here and the now.
Right.
I want to jump into what you mentioned earlier. I'm gonna let you say it so I don't get accused in the email for saying it. Go ahead. The question you posed earlier.
Well, so it seems to me that churches are trying to have it both ways with the separation of church and state. They want to be political actors, but they want the perks of not being, right? And so you have to pick or choose, right? So you mentioned...
And I think that's where we disagreed. The separation of church and state is about the state not running the church and the church not running the state. It does not say that the church cannot be politically active. It does not say that the church can't work towards curing the social ills. It just says that the Constitution can't be governed by Christianity and Christianity can't govern the Constitution, even though that doesn't seem to be true in America.
Yeah. But there are monetary ties to this, right? So the ability of churches not to pay, property taxes, a minister is not paying 100% of their income, is tied to a certain role for churches.
Right, and I agree with that, right.
And so churches want that. They want the perks of that, but not abiding by the role. And so for me, the larger problem is precisely what you're saying, that these institutions are not necessarily equipped to address the problem. So the problem isn't strictly gentrification, it's segregation, right? So the residential map of a place like Houston is tied to racial disregard that is all about segregation. The economic downfall of African Americans is tied to segregation. So churches building housing doesn't resolve this larger underlying problem.
No. We fought segregation in the 60s through the church. I mean, the drum major was the SCLC and other religious institutions.
But if you're going to follow King. Even King says the majority of black churches didn't fund the movement and were not participating.
Now, this is true.
So if you think in terms of the largest black denomination during the mid 20th century, National Baptist Convention USA, we end up with the Progressive National Baptist Convention because those folks said, no, we're not following King on this.
Right.
Right, so it is a mistake for me. It's an alternate narrative to say churches were involved. No, King said most of them weren't playing a role. They weren't financing
but he
it.
also said
they weren't providing the bodies.
that they should. But he definitely stated they should. Egberto.
Yeah, I don't have the historical context that
Just good, by the way,
that the professor has, right? But I kind of like to learn from that historical context, but also to move it forward. I think a whole lot of the problems that we have today have to do with power, right? I mean, if we look at from the mayorship right into the church, right into all most of the issues that we have is an issue of power and who doesn't have power.
Yeah.
And the people in the community don't have power because they don't think they have power. And when they don't think they have power, that's the way that they
And
act.
who better delivers the message of power? Power.
Right, and then,
Oh, I was about to get revved up.
oh, you're gonna sing? You're gonna sing?
You got to say it 3 times.
Yeah,
you can't say it just one time.
Yeah, power. So I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I want Emoetry, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the role of the church? Do you believe it has responsibility in the social ills of people of color?
I do. I believe that it does have responsibility for that. It has a responsibility of basically, this guy.
Go ahead. We listen.
My grandfather was a pastor in the church. Actually, the majority of my aunts, uncles, they all pastored churches. And just the responsibility of being a leader and being the shepherd of your flock, and being responsible for that is very important because, of course, I mean,
I agree.
This day and age,
It's
it's
very
not-
important.
yeah.
It's very important. Let's get down to the bag. We got to talk about the bag.
Okay.
All right. In 2019, we have places of worship, building facilities, big ones, millions and millions upon millions of dollars. We're not talking about grandma's building fund. We're talking about, the one that every Sunday stay the same. I'm like, are we ever gonna make a move on it? You got to be old school Black Baptists to know what I'm talking about. Old school.
Temperature gauge.
Yeah, the temperature gauge. Now we're spending 20, 30, 40, $50 million building facilities. The last episode of Fish, Grits, and Politics, we had a question, and that was part of how we ended up here today. We had a question about whether or not the church is deliberate, and should it be deliberate, in ensuring that the $50 million, the $30 million that they're using to build these facilities should be going towards people who look like the people who put the money inside of that collection plate. In short, are churches responsible for, and are they spending that money with black contractors, black engineering firms, black architects? And I'm not talking about the 10%.
Right.
I'm talking about the above and beyond, running over, window open.
We're hypocritical when we take to task government to hire us, and then when we build these amazing structures, we then don't follow our same fight. So we'll hire a white architect, and we'll hire a white building, construction firm, and so then, as if people aren't looking, they say, well, wait a minute, we were just down there with our pickets and all of that saying, hire black, right? And then when you get ready to spend my tithe and my offering, you give it to white folks.
Chef, what are your thoughts?
Hi. I did grow up in the church, Cashmere Gardens, Church of Christ. No music, no instruments. But even as a young kid, like around 13, I just saw stuff. So I started asking questions. And I was met with, you're being disrespectful. Resistance. So I just kind of gradually started to kind of fade away.
You know what? You bring up a great point, and I want to get back to the economics, but you bring up a great point, because one of the things that was on the survey was there was no room for doubt. There was no room for doubt. This was one of the deterrents that people confessed to as to why they no longer participate, was because they felt that there was no room for doubt. And growing up as a kid, When I asked my pastor what was the difference between Superman and Jesus, I was told to get the hell out of that office. And don't ask that. No. Oh, no, really, I did. I asked. I was like, what's the difference? We can. I mean, look, and here's Jesus brought Lazarus back. Superman flew around the world backwards and brought Lois Lane back. I was like, man, that's the same thing in my book. But it's a legitimate question that a kid had that a kid should have, addressed. Now, I want you to address it, but I want to get back to the economics, right? And the role. And Pastor Bady, did you want to comment on
No,
it?
go ahead.
So I did an unofficial survey one Sunday, right? I decided to go to a few restaurants, right? Went to 5 different restaurants, 4 of them African-American owned, and 1 of them not. And this was at high noon. This is brunch time, right? We're right in the middle, between 12 and 2. What I found was, of the 4 African-American restaurants, 4 of them were 50% full or less. The 1 non-African-American was 100% full with an hour wait. They were skipping service too. I'm just telling you, I saw them. But what was interesting to me was, of the restaurant that was 100% full with an hour wait, 80 to 90% of them were African-American. And of that 80 to 90%, about 70 to 80% of them, guess where they were coming from? Church. They were coming from church. And the appalling part to me is when I mention that to people, they say, well, why does that matter? And my question is, if you have the people in front of you and you have the opportunity to empower them, why are we not doing so? Is that a responsibility of the church?
I believe it is. I definitely believe it is, especially if we're trying to impart. The purpose of the church is to encourage, empower, uplift, inspire. And if you have people within your congregation that you can give hope to in terms of giving them the message of economic development and the whole 9, and you have people in the community that are doing those things, I think we definitely need to point them in that direction. Right. Now, I can't speak for every church. She said it earlier. It's not every church doing the wrong thing. I can only speak for the churches that I'm connected to, and the churches that I'm connected to are doing that very thing.
Got it. Any thoughts, Doc Egberto?
Church. Go ahead.
I think that is a problem within our community proper, and that is we have a tendency to, when we're looking for professional services and when we're looking for these other things, the last place we look at is at home. Likewise, and it doesn't only go from business, it goes from even politics. There is a degree of self-hate within the community that we have to work against. And one of the things that I promote is not only just loving yourself, but understanding that if you really truly believe in equality, it's not only about equality about blacks and Latinos or whites or whatever, but actually believe in it and act in what you believe. And that is what's important.
And who better to preach the message of loving yourself than the church? You see where I'm going with this?
I preach that
that scripture says, love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah, but yes.
Right? Book of Amos says, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. There we go.
You sound like a preacher.
But when it comes to these social issues, it seems to me in the 21st century, in light of the Trump presidency, we need new models, right? And that I'm still not convinced that the church is the right model for this, that it is one of the few organizations in the black community where a willing heart trumps expertise. Right? All you have to be you just had to be willing to do the work, not have the expertise. And we're basing this on an old model that is no longer accurate. It's based upon the model, the assumption that the minister was the best prepared, the best educated, the best placed to lead the work. That is no longer the case. And the Black Lives Matters proves the need for different strategies, different models of leadership.
I agree. What is still real, though, is the majority of money, the majority of places that black folks send their money, is in the black church. That's still real. The place that people rely on the most is still the church. I hear what you're saying, but we can't ignore the fact that while it's a new day, the old things are still existing because the bag is still sitting inside the sanctuary. I knew this was going to happen. Of course, we don't have enough time to finish this. Pastor Connie and I already talked about part 2, and I told her, "Are you sure?" Because part 2 gets a whole lot deeper than this, you know. But I'm grateful for you all coming out. I want to thank Pastor Bady and Pastor Connie for joining us. I want to thank Chef Hawkins. Y'all give it up for Chef Hawkins. With them saffron grits with coconut milk. Come in next week. Call up 3711 Tracks. You thought we invited you? I invited you to steal. You know? No, thank you, Doc. I appreciate you. Professor, you know we're going to have to finish this. We're going to go have a drink or something. We got to work this out. We got to work this out. And Egberto, thank you for joining us. Emoetry Speaks. It's a pleasure to have you and your gift. We appreciate you bestowing it on us. You know, you have a church, you got to use the word bestow. I just feel like bestow it. Hey, y'all stay tuned. We're about to wrap it up. But before we go, we got to get one last bite. We'll be right back.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Hey, that's our show. I want to thank all of y'all for joining us, but I can't leave you without leaving you with this last bite to chew on. I got to share with you that we must examine this belief that the church is immune to accountability or can't be asked questions or can't challenge the status quo. I want us to create and shape a space where it's okay to be inquisitive and it's okay to have an expectation of transparency. You should be able to talk to your church leaders about the areas of ill in the black community and ways to address them. You should be able to challenge the church to rise to the higher standards and be the leaders of the community that the community needs. I mean, after all, that is what Jesus did. Speaking of challenges, I want to challenge you to do something. Send an email this week. Send an email to your church leaders addressing the issues of the community that you think are important, be they gentrification, incarceration, wealth disparity, economic empowerment, education. Ask your leadership, what are we doing as a body about this issue? Ask your leadership, what are we doing to ensure the economic development of our community and the impact that we can have? In the words of Dr. King, people need some shoes and suits down here on earth. I want to thank our guests, Dr. Anthony Pinn, Egberto Willis, Pastor Connie C.J. Jackson. I want to thank him for not pinching me the whole time. I'm glad. Pastor Ray Bady, Chef Mark Anthony Hawkins, and Emoetry Speaks. Thanks to our sponsor, the City of Houston Health Department. You can become a sponsor if you go to fishgritsandpolitics.com for details, because we want your support. We want you joining us. Next month, we're going to be talking about gentrification. Is it them or is it us? Are they taking or are we letting go? Please share this link with the hashtag Fish, Grits, and Politics. And more importantly, subscribe to our YouTube page. Thank you for joining us. Peace.
Fish, grits, and politics sure sound good to me. We can still break bread together even if you don't really agree. Oh, yes. So come on in and take a seat. Oh, yes. Sit back and grab something to eat. Oh, yes. Listen up, we got something to teach. Marcus is gonna blow your mind. Fish, grits, and politics sure sound good to me.